Hello, this is Capital Ideas Live, the video version of the magazine for people doing business in Moscow or for people who want to do business here. I'm John Harrison.
The whole of Europe is meeting in Moscow.
La pizza napoletana e la birra si abbina benissimo.
The evening would not end without conflict, but it doesn't mean that you're not family.
Why is investing in Moscow right now profitable?
If you compare the dynamics, compare the last year to this year, we would see definitely an increase.
Watch it now. Capital Ideas Live.
Capital cities do not only represent their country to the world, they also represent a way that the world can view those particular countries. Moscow is the gateway between Russia and the world. And the gateway between Russia and the whole world, and as the capital city of the Russian Federation, Moscow attracts a huge number of companies and people from the whole world. Now, our next report is about some of those companies and some of those individuals who've decided to invest their talents, their resources and their time into the city of Moscow.
The Russian economy is continuing its assured growth. This autumn, the Fitch agency changed its prediction for the country's credit rating from stable to positive. What's behind these changes? Who might know? Denis Aristov is perhaps the most stylish building manager in Eastern Europe. He manages the Orka complex in the Moscow city district. Denis knows better than most how changes in the business climate are reflected in the residents of elite apartments and tenants in the most expensive offices. A huge number of active foreign legal entities open their branches here and start their activities here. Representatives of large-scale business, small business, medium-sized business, global brands, there are more and more of them. Commercial real estate is a reliable indicator for the state of the economy. The office of CBRE, a major player on the commercial real estate market, is located on the 29th floor of the Orka Tower. From here, the work of thousands of offices across the whole of Russia is supported.
Welcome to CBRE office.
Choosing between Moscow and New York, Denis Beer opted for the Russian capital, a city of opportunities.
You can see one of the biggest open space areas.
The company's successes are measured in the growth of the number of deals done over the course of the year.
If you compare the dynamics, compare the last year to this year, we would see definitely an increase in foreign activity. Just to give you some numbers, in terms of the percentage of all new deals concluded as far as purchases or office leases, a year ago the percentage was roughly about 10 to 12%, and right now it's roughly 24–25%. So we see it's doubled just over the last year.
Where does this growth come from? And why has this become possible right now specifically? The Moscow government in recent times has done a great deal in order to create a more attractive climate for foreign investors. Today we have the best conditions. Concessions are possible, tax benefits for a period of 10 years are possible, significant reductions in tax loads in comparison with cities such as Paris and New York, where those loads on business are still fairly high, are possible. Nowhere else in the world has as many programs for the support of investors and even insurance risks as Moscow. The time to make use of this chance is right now.
Young business people, wherever they are, they all know that we live on the same planet. It doesn't matter which countries they come from, whether those countries share common borders or not. International relations have become absolutely vital. And somebody who understands just how important such relations are is Sergei Cheryomin, the head of the International Relations Department of the Moscow city government. But what makes Moscow attractive for foreign partners? And what's so unique about Moscow?
Well-known companies like Boeing, like Cisco, like Schneider Electric are opening big engineering center in the city, that shows that they really appreciate the human potential. Thus, I think that Moscow is also very attractive from the legislation point of view, because last year Moscow Parliament adopted special law that protects investments from non-commercial risks. And it is written in the law that any investor has a right for pre-arbitration settlement of all the, let's say, problematic situations if they happened because of the non-qualified actions of Moscow bureaucrats or some other, let's say, actions from the state. That creates quite unique also situation.
Who ideally are you trying to attract to Moscow? Is your attention focused on the West or the East?
Traditionally, on the first places are Cyprus and Luxembourg, and we understand with you that these are reinvestment.
Yeah.
But if you look at the basic investment, you'll see that we have Germany, England, France, United States, by the way, Switzerland, and all the other countries who are prevailing in the investments. Moscow is really diversified, and we have good examples of the Eastern investment, but they are not nowadays so big, and that shows that Moscow, like the Russian eagle, still looks at the East and at the West.
Right. You know, they say that Moscow is a kind of a state within a state. And sometimes it seems like that to me. In your opinion, how true is that?
It seems to me that Moscow is a very good, let's say, not pilot project, but the place where you can launch some pilot projects, renovation of streets, new environment standards, modernization of transport infrastructure, and building new roads in a very complicated conditions of the most densely populated city.
Yeah.
That shows that Moscow is a very good platform for growing up some innovative ideas.
As we know, relations between Russia and Europe at the present time are not exactly enjoying a kind of honeymoon period. Because of the sanctions, Russia's had to develop certain indices to replace some of the goods which it used to import from Europe. Now, of course, this has had pretty disastrous consequences on some of the businesses and companies in Europe. But that doesn't mean to say that all companies and business people from Europe have left Moscow.
Classica pizza napoletana.
A seventh-generation piazzaiolo or pizza maker, Giuseppe Peluso cooks according to all the Neapolitan rules, but in the southwest of Moscow. He's worked as a chef in many Italian restaurants, and now he's opened his own, an English restaurant. English because Neapolitan pizza and beer really go together well. In Moscow, a wealth of incredibly varied cuisines are represented. Giuseppe Peluso confirms that, one after another, his countrymen are leaving their homelands, warmed by the Mediterranean sun, for Moscow, and opening restaurant businesses here. There's competition, of course. Genuinely excellent places that use really high-quality products, Italian flour. There are 20 at most. Russian mozzarella and milk are really good. But Moscow's expats aren't just baking pizzas. Their businesses work in pharmaceuticals, the agricultural industry, the production of equipment and other spheres. Every year, Europe loses billions of euros and hundreds of thousands of jobs as a result of anti-Russian sanctions, so European business is the most active supporter of their abolition. Moscow has shown that it can even survive without Europe, but I think that Europe finds the going very tough without Russia. That's because it's a vast market with enormous intellectual potential. Yes, Britain is leaving the European Union. Yes, Russia is subject to sanctions, but in this pub, English beer will always be served with Italian pizza and Russian cheese. Because it's delicious.
Now, to throw some light on this really rather complex political and economic situation we're in here in Russia to do with Europe, we speak to the ambassador of Luxembourg here in Moscow. Now, Luxembourg may seem like a small country, but in fact, it's incredibly important. It's right in the middle of Europe and right in the middle of Europe's economic and political discussions. Ambassador, how long have you been here?
I've been here since August, the 12th of August 2016. So I went through my first Russian winter. My son was born here, so I've had the full experience of Moscow, yes.
Europe is Europe, nevertheless. We're going through a very interesting, seems to me, fragmentation process at the moment. But Europe is Europe. There is an underlying basic European culture, and many people say that Russia is also part of Europe. Do you feel that the culture, underlying European culture, is strong enough to overcome differences that we're experiencing at the moment?
Well, I believe that we do have differences in Europe. I mean, we're a family of 28 now. Yeah. One might leave the table in 2019. Imagine your family, just your family, at on Christmas or New Year's Eve, 28 people around a table. The evening would not end without conflict, but that doesn't mean that you're not family. As for Russia being part of the European family, walk around Moscow, it is Europe, but it has also a different flavor to it. Mm-hmm. Russia has a different history. Well, of course, we share a history. Russia is our largest neighbor, but Russia is also of continental dimension, stretching into Asia. My wife is Russian, and when we served in New York, we came to a restaurant in Chinatown. People would speak Chinese to her because she looks Asian. And that is the diversity of Russia.
How do you see Luxembourgian-Russian relations developing in the future?
I think the situation has forced Russian leadership, the Russian economy, to rethink certain things. I always found it very odd when I came to Moscow in the 2000s. It was impossible to find a piece of Russian bred beef or Russian chicken or certain vegetables. Now that's normal. There's a lot of development there. If this can happen in other fields, I believe that Made in Russia has a future, and Made in Russia, with the help of say European Luxembourg investment, know-how and skills, would be a way for us also to produce high-quality goods closer to us, not necessarily going into Eastern Asia, and integrate Russia in a better way with the European markets.
In our next issue, John Harrison's questions will be answered by the head of the Moscow Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Vladimir Platonov. Thanks to the sanctions, we found out that we can feed ourselves. Next time on Capital Ideas Live.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time to show you today. I do hope you've enjoyed the programme. Join me again next week. I'm John Harrison.